Winnie the Pooh was my first favourite childhood story. Not the cutesy-fied Disney one, but the charming, crazy Edwardian Winnie the Pooh, the real Winnie the Pooh with those weird drawings that I later learned were great art, but I thought were just scratches at the time. What was great about Winnie the Pooh for me was that it was a character that I could relate to. I think everyone relates to a different character in Winnie the Pooh, and for me it was Pooh. The fact that he was bumbling, the fact that he was not particularly charming or handsome, the fact that he had good intentions but seemed to get through things nonetheless, was something that I could relate to personally. But it was also my first experience of learning through stories. The fact that all the characters were different and yet seemed to be able to come together, face their problems and have adventures together and have great outcomes. For me, that was a great learning experience. And I think we all in this room are familiar with the idea of learning through stories, and we've talked about it a lot today. And we also learn about the idea of learning through simulations and apps and technology, but stories still remain important, and particularly those stories that have come from near to you. I think there's something so much more powerful about the story that you hear from a colleague or a supervisor or a fellow registrar. So I often tell my registrar's stories about the things I've done, and particularly the things I've done wrong in the past, in the hope that they will learn from those vicariously. I want them to learn the medical lessons of the things I've done wrong, but I also want them to realise that I actually often stuff up, and that it's not about being perfect, that none of us are perfect. It's about the willingness to try and improve all the time. It's about continuous improvement. If you like, it's about the fact that the good doctor never stops learning. So one of the things I often think when I'm talking to these registrars and telling them about these sorts of stories about that I'm sure they're often sitting there thinking, what a moron, and why would I ever listen to anything that you ever say? So one of the stories I tell them is about me as an excellent communicator, because I think that's one of the things that I can show them that I can do. And one of the stories relates to my time as a medical registrar. Having been a GP for some time, I went and became a medical registrar for a while, and it was years and years ago. And I was working in a busy metropolitan Melbourne hospital, and an elderly lady was brought in, and she was brought in essentially dead. She'd had a heart attack and she was dead. But I was too young and enthusiastic and full of adrenaline to realise that. And so I brought her in and we did all these heroic things, and I ran this arrest and it was all fabulous. And at the end of it, the diagnosis was that she was dead, just the way she was brought in. But that wasn't the end of it. The head nurse turned to me and said, look, you're the new medical registrar, you're pretty wonderful, you need to go and talk to the family. And I thought, well, I've done general practice, if there's one thing I can do, it's communicate, that's no problems, I'll do that. The thing was, I stepped out of the resus cubicle, still sort of shaking and because I wasn't that used to running arrests, and walked straight into the daughter of this woman who had been sent there as the spokesperson for the family, because she was clearly the person who spoke the best English. So I was a bit taken aback by that and realised that this isn't the appropriate place to be talking to about this. And so I introduced myself, as you do, and said that, look, we really need to pop around to the relatives' room and have a bit of a chat. To which she said, what is it? I know it's not a heart because she saw the cardiologist last week and he said that her heart was fine. It was all due to her esophagitis. To which I said, look, we really need to talk about this. Can we just pop around to the relatives' room and we need to have a chat? To which she said, what is it? To which I said, we really need to have a chat about this. Can we pop around to the relatives' room and we'll have a chat? To which she said, what is it? And it went on like this for some time, some 10 exchanges of this. But the thing you need to know, that every time she said, what is it, she got about 10 decibels louder and 10 feet further away from me. And I got more and more sort of, can we just go to the relatives' room? And it ended up with her on the opposite side of the emergency department, arms akimbo, screaming at the top of her voice, what is it? The pressure was clearly beginning to mount on me at this point. And I was, not surprisingly, the one that cracked. Now what happened next is not something I'm particularly proud of. I found myself yelling across the emergency department, yes, I'm afraid you're right, "Your mother is dead," at the top of my voice. Now, that wasn't particularly cool. I felt pretty bad about that, but, you know, I thought it really couldn't get much worse than that. But it could. So on hearing this news, she naturally wanted to go to the rest of the family who were waiting on the other side of the big ambulance doors, somewhat ironically all smoking. Now, you know that ambulance doors for most hospitals have an electronic eye on the outside and a big red button that you hit on the inside. Now, we all know that. She didn't. She ran to the ambulance doors, expecting them to open. The thud echoed right throughout the emergency department, and she finished as a quivering mess, sobbing at the bottom of the ambulance door, drumming very pathetically, saying, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." So again, using my excellent general practice skills, I realised that what she needed now was not further medical intervention, but to be reunited with the rest of her family. I hit that big red button so that she might be reunited with the rest of her family. The doors opened with sufficient force to hit her in the head and send her sprawling back through the emergency department on her back on the floor. I felt pretty embarrassed at this point. She stood up, jumped out, ran into the family. They all hugged and cried and were happy to get, well, happy. They were consoling one another. The reason I tell the story is a couple of reasons. I think it's a pretty funny story. It's probably the most important reason. I learned a few things from the story though. I learned the importance of getting the nurses to get the patient into the relatives room before you walk out. I learned that it wasn't all about me. Once that news had been given to them, that the family, the woman had no idea who I was or that I was even on the planet. And I learnt the importance of stories. 2 years ago, I became the chair of the GP Supervisors Association, and I found that I had to talk to politicians, throw mics around, ministers, and other key decision makers. And I found that most of them actually have very little idea of what it is that GPs actually do. They think they know, but they actually don't know what we do. They think we see coughs and colds. We do a lot more than that, we know that. They really struggle when it comes to what medical educators do. When it comes to supervisors, they had absolutely no idea. And I found that the ability to come up with some stories to tell these people was really important. So don't get me wrong, you know, I'm that sciencey, nerdy kid, so I'm rooted in facts and figures and things like that, and evidence-based and statistics and studies are really important. But when it comes to influencing the decision makers, I had to learn a whole new skill set about telling the story of what it is to do general practice and general practice education and supervision. So I think stories are important. The stories we tell each other are important. We need to be able to tell each other the stories of things that we do well. We really need to be able to tell each other the stories of the things that we do badly so that we can learn and grow from those stories. But more importantly, we need to tell each other and the community the stories of the things that we do well. They are so important. Whenever you read a medical journal or there's always an article about things that GPs do badly. And that's really important because we're always seeking to improve and do better. But I think it's really important that we stop and tell each other and others the stories of the things that we do well. And there's a lot of them. We do very well in this country. Our primary care, our health system is excellent. And we need to take some time to tell each other that. So like Winnie the Pooh, we GPs approach things with a good attitude, a warm heart, a willingness to try and improve and help. And I think that and those stories enable us to hit that big red button that really helps people and adds meaning to their lives. Thank you.